Okay, the last step in making our Celtic gloves is to sew the seam up the sides. And I know this is sort of an intimidating process if you're new to knitting or loom knitting, but it's doable. It's not that difficult. And we've done a couple of things with this pattern to make it a little bit easier. One of the things is knitting with the edge stitches. That gives you a nice clean edge, and you can see you have these consistent stitches along the sides. So that makes it pretty easy to find the stitches to do your seam. And then we've also put markers where the thumb hole should go. I'm going to do a sort of quick sizing to see how this works. So what I want is for the thumb hole to be, at the right spot. So if I put my thumb in between those two markers, does the top of my glove come about to the right spot? And I think it does. You probably want it to be just sort of up a little bit below the knuckles. So I think that will work. And it looks like it's a good size as well. It's enough space for my thumb to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and use those markers where they are to show where my thumb hole will be. And we will start by measuring out enough yarn to do the seam. I'm going to do probably 4 times the length. Because we are starting and stopping the seam, we're going to have a couple of knots in the middle. So we want a good length of yarn to work with. And I think about 4 times the length of it should be good. So I'm going to cut off that yarn and thread it into my needle. The easiest way to thread these is, I wet my fingers and then twist the end, and then I can usually get it through. And I'll pull the yarn most of the way through the needle so that I've got it almost folded in half. And then I'll, as I'm working, I'll pull out more yarn because this means sort of less pulling as you get started. So now I'm going to turn with the inside, I'm going to seam it inside out. So I'm going to turn with the right side and fold it over. And then I'm going to find my sort of 2 beginning stitches here. So here we have, you can see the tail from my cast on. And when I do a seam, I always do, I put the needle through 2 pieces of thread. So doing it through 1 doesn't make a very strong seam. So I'm actually going to do 2. So there you can see I've got 2 strands of thread on the needle. And then I'm going to find 1 on the other side. Again, 2 strands. And I'll pull it most of the way through. And this beginning knot is just I just tie a knot, a double knot. And you leave a little bit of tail so you can tuck that in. And your knot will stay secure. Now, what I usually do to save myself a lot of weaving in ends, so I've got these 2 ends. This is the end I just made for the knot that I did. This is the tail that was left from my cast on. I'm going to cut it off a bit because it doesn't need that to be that long. But I'm going to take those 2 ends that would need to be weaved in, and I'm just going to incorporate them in the stitches of the seam, which means I won't have to weave them in later. So as I sort of keep track of where those ends are, and I'm going to find the next stitch. So you have to sort of look for where your yarn has gone through. So here's my next stitch on this side, and then get these out of the way and find the next stitch on the other side. Looks like it's this one. Okay. And now I'm going to take those two ends that I'm trying to hide and lay them over here so they get worked into the stitch. And then I'll pull my yarn almost through. And for mattress stitch, what you want to do is as you pull each stitch tight, you want to bring the yarn through that loop. That gives you a nice secure stitch. And I already can, there we go. Now, next stitch here. So we already went through this stitch. We're going to find the next stitch on this one. Again, always 2 strands. And then the next stitch on this side. Okay. Pull through, get those 2 ends down in so they'll catch in the stitch, and then before I pull the stitch completely tight, I'm going to bring my yarn through it so I get that mattress stitch. Okay, I'm going to show you one more. Again, next stitch here, next stitch here. And it actually, this is the easiest kind of seam to do because the stitches all line up with each other on both sides. Whoops, I forgot to pull through there. There we go. And you can see, I mean, I've done 3 stitches, probably another one, and I'll pretty much have these ends worked in, and then they'll be out of my way. And you just keep working your way up. And I will do a little more off camera, and I'll stop when I get to my marker for the thumb hole. Okay, I have gotten almost to the point where my markers are, and something has happened that I wanted to show you. So you can see on this bottom side, I have this stitch, and then the following stitch is where the marker is. On the top side, I've already reached the place where the marker is. So either I started off a little bit at the other end, or I missed a stitch on one side somewhere. It's not a big problem. What I will do is just kind of adjust. So I'm going to do, my next stitch is going to go through the next stitch on the bottom side, and then it will actually go through the stitch with the marker on this side. So I'll get that stitch tight. And then the next stitch will move over to the one with the marker on the bottom, and will stay in that same stitch where the marker is on the top. So we've just compensated for things being off a little bit, and it won't be a problem. So I'm going to finish that stitch. Okay, then what I will do is make a knot by making another stitch in that same space. So I'm just going to go right through where my yarn was before and do a knot there. Let's see if I can get some of these extra threads out of the way. There we go. Now I've got a good knot. I will cut this off. Let's see, give a little bit of space so that we can weave that end in. Now, to get these out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take these yarn markers out of here. I didn't tie them too tight, so I hopefully can get them off fairly easily. And notice that I used, a yarn that was a completely different color, so it was easy to see where they were. That's what we keep our scrap yarn for. So what we'll do then is take these out, and then we'll just start the seam. We've got enough thread to do the rest of the seam. There are only a few stitches on this next part, and So I'll just start and do the same thing again. So this time I'm going to find the stitches where the markers are. So again, we want to make sure you've got, the marker only goes around one thread, so sometimes it's a little tricky to get that stitch in such a way that you can get the two threads together. So there are those two threads. And then let me find the next one. I think these two threads, this one and this one. So I'm going to start and make my knot. And again, I can, the tail from this knot, I can just work into the stitches so I don't have to weave it in later. And since I know I'm starting in the right spot, I'm going to go ahead and get these markers out of the way as well. So you can see that this, doing a seam when you've knit with those edge stitches is pretty easy. That nice clean edge makes it easy to find the stitches to sew them together. So I always, whenever I'm doing a flat panel that I might be seaming together, or even if I'm going to be doing something like crocheting a border or something, again, having those stitches, those edge stitches that are so clean makes it a lot easier to crochet or to seam together. So there's my first stitch. I think that's the next one. And sometimes it is, it's still a little tricky finding the next stitch occasionally, but if you end up getting off a little bit, it's not that difficult to fix at the end of the seam. So don't be intimidated by sewing seams. There are a lot of things you can do once you get to the point where you can sew panels together. And again, whoops, I forgot to pull through there. I do, I guess a true mattress stitch includes that step where as you pull the stitch tight, you put the needle through the loop here. And that does kind of make a tighter stitch. But if you forget to do it again, it's not, your garment's not going to fall apart. So I am almost, there were only a few stitches to do on this one. And when we get to the end, sometimes I'll do sort of an extra stitch through there just to make sure that because sometimes right at the edge, they don't line up as well. So you might need to do, an extra stitch to get everything to line up properly. There we go. And that final stitch to get a good knot. On the end, I sometimes will do, even a third stitch just to make sure it's good and secure. All right, and we cut off our end, and then we just, I'm not going to weave in my ends right now, but I am going to turn this around. So now you can see the pattern on the outside. I'll put it on, get my thumb through that thumb hole. And we've made a fairly simple but really beautiful pattern with a Celtic knot and a fingerless glove. So hope you've enjoyed knitting this pattern, and I hope to have some more patterns on Ravelry soon. Let me know what you're interested in seeing by messaging me on YouTube or on Ravelry. Thank you for watching.